Good morning. I want to begin by thanking you, Myers Park, for inviting me to join you in worship this morning. It is so good to be back. Some of you may remember when I served here as pastoral intern several years ago, and now it's my high honor to come back here to preach. You all are a necessary church, I have always known, and I count you as friends and fellow pilgrims on a shared journey of faith. To see you this morning is a balm for my spirit, and I am grateful. And now may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. In a moment when violence is modeled as the cultural norm, and division courses through our national bloodstream like a virus, there are some people, saintly people, like Fred Rogers, who stand out as witnesses against the darkness of our time. Lately, I have surprised myself by coming to see Mr. Rogers as a kind of John the Baptist. Imagine, it sounds crazy, but imagine a gentle prophet wrapped in a homespun cardigan, pointing us toward grace and truth as it moves through the neighborhood. That's an unusual take, I know. And maybe I'm reflecting this way because I've just finished reading Maxwell King's fine biography of Rogers, The Good Neighbor. Midway through the book, King tells the story about Rogers' friendship with the opera singer Francois Clemens. Most of us remember him as Officer Clemens, the resident policeman in the neighborhood of make-believe. In 1968, Rogers produced a memorable episode in which he invited Officer Clemens to join him in relaxing on a hot summer day by resting his tired feet in the kiddie pool out in his front yard. It was the late 60s, a time when interracial swimming was, to many, simply out of the question. Needless to say, the messaging of that episode was clear and bold. In '93, Rogers gave that powerful moment an encore by reenacting the scene with Clemens, bringing that gentle yet prophetic message to a new audience. The day filming wrapped up, Clemens listened as Mr. Rogers faced the camera and said those beloved words, "You make every day special just by being you, and I like you just the way you are." When he first heard those words in '68, Clemens, a gay man, was working in the arts at a time when, for most, required the closet. So there was only so much of Rogers' televised benediction that he could absorb. But this time, after hearing it through the years of television shows, it suddenly settled differently into his soul. I like you just the way you are. And when he first heard those words in '68, they hit differently. This time, he turned to Rogers, who had long known about his hidden sexuality, and he asked, "Fred, are you talking to me?" To this, Rogers replied, "Yes, I have been talking to you for years, but you heard me today." As any queer or othered person can tell you, hearing a response like that is a revelation, choking the darkness from inside the closet with new light, changing everything. It's an epiphany that Clemens had, a powerful, affecting lesson and something important, the sudden realization of something crucial. And that epiphany didn't necessarily come from anything new. It happened through words he'd been hearing for years. Some among us could use one of those epiphanies right about now. A heaping helping of something real and true and hopeful to carry us into whatever it is that's waiting between the blank months of our new calendars. Looking back at the exhaustion of last year, we hope 2026 will be better than last. But we don't know anything outside the limits of our own intuition. But here's what we do know this Epiphany Sunday: that God became one of us, making a home with us, vesting God's self in our full humanity so that we may be dressed with grace. That's what we know. The test of our faith, then, is whether that familiar fact is enough. And I am persuaded that it is. It may just be that we have to keep growing into it. Speaking of growth, have you ever wondered what came across the child Jesus' mind when on that first Epiphany morning those adoring wise men came all the way to Nazareth to give him, a toddler, gold, frankincense, and myrrh? Of all things to bring a growing boy, the Magi brought 3 mystical gifts. So I wonder, did it occur to them that Jesus might have wanted that toy donkey in the shop window they passed down the street? And what about those little clay birds on clearance at the hardware store, the ones Jesus caressed so tenderly whenever Joseph came in to buy nails and a new hammer? He wanted toys, not a grab bag from the funeral home. But that's what he got. And I can imagine him growing up with these things. I can see him, if I look closely enough, on his 13th birthday, peering up into the china cabinet, where from his seat in the dining room, he can glimpse them high on the shelf. He notices how pretty they are. By 18, he starts musing over what exactly these 3 gifts mean, and why he, of all the boys in Nazareth, was the one who got them. By 33, of course, he knows, having wrestled his way into Epiphany. John's gospel, as you know, shows the Epiphany in a different way from Matthew, whose gospel gives us those wise men. With no Magi or Mary or Joseph in sight, John's opening narrative focuses on one thing: the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Between gospels and creeds and statements of faith, we in the Christian community have spilled a whole lot of ink over the glory that was and is the incarnation of God in Jesus. Now, don't let anyone fool you into thinking that this incarnation talk is just some heady exercise for pipe-smoking theologians in a black and white picture. No, these verses, these ideas, if they're any good, point, like John the Baptist, beyond themselves and into our ongoing wonder. They mean to guide us into contemplation more than they mean to relay a sequence of facts. They aim our concentration down into the mysterious root of all, which is that God so loved the world that God bent down and scooped up Eden's leftover dirt to make Adam again, this time filling him past the brim with grace and truth. In the most hallowed moment in the scale of time, God became a creature, a human person who thinks and grows and moves just as we do. We who, from John's perspective, have in Jesus been given the right to become children of God. That becoming seems important to the writer of this gospel. But what if our becoming gets, intercepted? I'm reminded of how I used to hear warnings not to drink coffee as a kid, that it would stunt my growth. That idea, of course, made a scoop of Edie's coffee ice cream into the stuff of rebellion, which only made it sweeter. And how many in my generation faithfully swallowed a regimen of Accutane pills for 4 whole months to get rid of chronic acne, all with the fear of side effects that we might accidentally give up our right to grow and become? At just under 6 feet tall, I think I dodged the bullet allegedly fired by coffee beans and acne pills. But an important question remains. Can we impede our becoming? And the answer is, I believe, no. not if we heed the witness of John the Baptist. I remember when I first started thinking seriously about Jesus' fanatical cousin, who so often has just made me squirm. I was in Savannah as a college student when, while walking downtown with my parents and my sister, I wandered into the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. It's a gorgeous, ornate place, surprisingly appointed for such an austere saint. The architecture itself embodied a conflict I'd lived with for years. That is, how is this grace upon grace Jesus possibly connected to the hot-headed John? Something just didn't match up. Eventually, I learned to hear his strident voice by seeing him first, by watching how he embodied his sermons, what he did with his hands, where he was pointing, and for whom. These days, the Baptist reminds me of an essay Flannery O'Connor once published about the craft of writing. She argues that the writer must speak to her audience in a way that gets her point across, even if you can only do that through shock. She writes, "To the hard of hearing you shout, and for the almost blind you draw large and startling figures." That's what John is doing, the evangelist that is, with John the Baptist. The gospel uses this shocking, unforgettable character to capture our attention, pivoting us toward the always revelatory glory of God, which we have seen in Jesus, the light that shines unvanquished in the darkness. And John, crazy as hell but enlightened by heaven, still stands to the side of everyday life, daily aiming our sight toward the one who is its burning center, he who is our Epiphany. It's a lasting glimpse of glory that we have seen, a vital, pulsing memory that God has preserved in our hearts in order to rear us with the Christ child into the full stature of grace and truth, to become children of God. But make no mistake, we retreat to the shadows if we assume that glory only shined for 33 years before abruptly scattering back into heaven, leaving us to crawl down here through the pitch dark. No, far from it. Our gospel lesson says the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's already happened. But notice how that statement is prefaced by the present tense. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That's happening today. And all we must do is permit this glimpse of glory to establish us further and further into the grace we saw lying in a manger 10 days ago. Bill Leonard, a man dear to so many of us, knew someone who did this very well. As many of you know, his daughter Stephanie died in November. And though I can remember being in church services with Stephanie, I regret that our paths never formally crossed, as so many of yours did. My knowledge of her then is largely limited to what I've read from Dr. Leonard's pen. In fact, he's published a moving reflection on her 50 radiant years in Baptist News Global that I recommend to your reading. Though she lived with intellectual disabilities, Stephanie grew into faith as a committed Baptist, serving actively with her family in the First Baptist Church in Winston-Salem. She brought a similar passion and commitment to this place, too, when she visited. Dr. Leonard remembers an occasion when he came here to preach in this spot, Stephanie in tow. It was summertime then, so in talkback over in Heaton Hall, one church member stood up to the microphone after the service and asked, "And who is this lovely lady with you today?" As her father tells it, and some of you may be here to remember this, Stephanie left him no time for an introduction. Rather, she stood up from her seat and sang, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." And then she finished her singing. She turned to her friend beside her and said, "Bet you didn't think I could do that, did you?" Today, Stephanie voices the message of John the Baptist by pointing to this little light of yours and mine. And if we are to believe that this light is in fact bright and imperishable, we must look with Stephanie and John the Baptist within to the one whose glory makes it so. Now, I don't know about you, but if I am to believe that this light endures through the moral famine of our day, I'll be needing much more than mere assurance voiced from one liberal to another. In an era when the resources that support the lives of disabled people, like Stephanie Leonard, are being kicked to the curb, I'll need more than a spoonful of optimism to keep believing in this little light of mine. If I am to say and believe that the light of love wins, while transgender people are scapegoated and blamed for the sins of the insolent rich, I will need to see that promise authenticated. And if I am to carry in my soul the conviction that darkness has not overcome in an hour when good men are tortured in detainment centers, if I am to hold the candle that is our story and believe it's still lit, I will need an epiphany of my own to hold that belief down. I will need an epiphany spoken and birthed and lived and tried and crucified and resurrected and glorified. I will need that epiphany to come from God's own hand, because none of us can promise that light. Only God can. And in Jesus, God does. You see, the glory of God, which we have seen in the Word made flesh, isn't a lost artifact. And neither is what we've just heard from the fourth gospel, some canonized retrospective fit for a dusty table at the antique mall. It's a reality spoken by God and etched by her Spirit across our hearts that is meant to shape us into conscious participants in a world-shaking, wrong-righting epiphany. Children of God who turn toward glory so that they may grow into the grace and truth that God is using to light the cosmos. But so what? To what end do we become children of God? We evolve toward glory because in our becoming, God is gathering us further and higher into the center of the divine life. Jesus is always calling us beyond what we think we know of God by guiding us higher into the glory we've already seen, by revealing to us over and over again in the gradual conversion of our lives that God is more beautiful than we ever knew, more gracious than we ever dreamed, more just than we ever dared, more loving than we could perceive. All the accolades we've learned through the past, God is that, and God is more. That's why this erratic John points so urgently. And in the cascading of grace upon grace, Epiphany still dawns on us. If only we will hear this sacred story yet again, even if to do it we must stand on the edge of every familiar sentence to seek and find the divine word who shines beyond even our best words. What child is this? This luminous word. This is he. Amen.